and welcome to Deep in Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we dive deep into Warbo's most second work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Collateral 4.10, and Blake is invited inside by the guy with the shotgun that he faced off at the end of the previous chapter, and he is surprised to find that the knights seem to be exactly who he expected to hang out in a roadside convenience store.
Yeah, and so I guess for the rest of the chapter we're referring to this guy as Shotgun Knight, because that's what Blake refers to him as in his monologue.
Which is a great name for a character. Do you think it's a burn to say that he's not surprised? I mean, that's kind of how Blake sees it.
Wait, that he's not surprised that they're the sorts of people, or they look like the sort of people who'd hang out at a roadside convenience store.
He takes a few paragraphs to really think through how they're really just kind of, they look a bit, I don't know, dingy.
I guess to me, and I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding roadside convenience store, but to me that just said like truckers, like you know, and they're all sort of described as kind of like wearing flannel and they're quite like beefy. So I was just sort of, to me, I just thought he was implying that they look like truckers, which I was expecting like a nerdy D&D group type thing. So, you know, it was important for me to sort of get that image.
Mm.
And I just like that they look so casual. You know, Blake goes off on a bit of a thought tangent about, you know, how they just look like normal people. And a sort of theme of this chapter is you can just be a bit of a casual practitioner. Like, you know, there's some doubt as to whether the Knights of the Basement were always like that, but they talk about some others who are just kind of, you know, dabblers, basically.
Yeah, totally. Which is something that we've kind of seen in interludes, I guess. But Blake
it's been mentioned,
really
but it's not something Blake's ever seen, and he kind of almost gets called out on that a few times in this chapter, and because it's so very different to his experience of the introduction to this world that he can't fathom people would do it and not be fighting for their life every 30 seconds.
Yeah, so Blake kind of introduces himself to the knights. There are 4 of them, and none of them want to introduce themselves to him.
Yeah, my first thought to this was, that's fair. Like, you know, they have been told he's a diabolist, and then I also thought Fell is the one who told them he's a diabolist, so I wonder if Fell didn't manage to sneak in some extra decoration around just introducing him as a diabolist to fuck with Blake, because that would be very Fell. So I wonder if they didn't just know it's a diabolist coming, but Fell sort of set him up to sound like more of an evil.
Do you think Fell has kind of been his hype man, talking up how bad he is? Yeah, I mean, the knights are kind of on edge about meeting him, right? Like, he's a diabolist, he's in air quotes, working for conquest. Yeah,
he's pretty upfront about the fact, he's pretty upfront to these guys about the fact that he's not really looking to work for conquest.
Yeah, his first 2 words were,
stop conquest.
Take down conquest, fuck conquest, yeah.
There's also a large cat that's brought up at the start here that, I don't know, I just assumed that was maybe a familiar. Like, I guess it could just be a cat, because it doesn't come up again in the chapter. But it got me thinking about why an other would become a familiar to, like, a dabbler practitioner. Because, you know, they sort of need to get something out of it. And we've seen, you know, in Famulus some examples of how powerful ones end up with powerful practitioners, but I wonder if there's like these sort of low-level spirits that are just like, you know, that'd be a cool 50-year gig, whatever.
Just chill out in a convenience store for 50 years.
Yeah. They may not even remember why they signed up.
Oh, they may have forgotten that they're another. Now they just live their life as a regular cat. So we get introduced to one of the themes that I really love in this chapter, which is Blake just kind of bringing the knights on side by being, I don't know, charming, friendly, normal.
Normal.
He's just very likable. He really kind of plays up that he's like a man of the people kind of thing, and he starts out with the knights being super on edge, but over the course of this chapter, he just kind of brings them more and more on side. It's a really great kind of recurring beat throughout the chapter. I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely were under the impression they were getting some seasoned evil diabolist, and then it was just this like 20-year-old guy who kind of makes it a little bit clear that like he's just some dude who's way out of his depth and in the middle of the shit, and like, hey, could you help me out a bit? Yeah, because like I guess if I were him, I probably would have played that angle even harder. I would have been like, hey, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. Could you help me out? But I guess showing that much weakness might not be as helpful.
Yeah, and probably I mean Blake. I don't get the impression Blake is great at like acting in air quotes. I feel like the more naturalistic he plays it, the better.
Yeah, true. There's also this line early on where the shotgun knight says that he has this overwhelming instinct to shoot Blake with his shotgun, and Blake blames this on pose, and there's like this whole thing because Blake sort of implies it's like, oh well, people get inverted, so like basically that's just saying that you're a nice guy. But it's interesting because my first thought before Blake said it was pose was I just assumed it was karma, like the spirits just giving this guy a nudge, being like, hey, just do it.
Hey, just kill it. Just do it.
I mean, it could be both, but
yeah, it probably is both, to be honest.
And it's interesting because this is something I've been meaning to bring up for a while, and I keep forgetting. But I guess I'm now of the understanding that like if Blake gets killed by karma, or when karma causes something bad to happen to Blake, that doesn't like reduce the debt, right? Like it's almost like the bad luck is your interest.
No, I
guess
think it does reduce the debt. It's an attempt to move closer to balance.
Yeah, that was my understanding. But then couldn't Blake just try and have bad luck? Like, isn't it kind of a good thing then when he's having bad luck?
Well, I mean,
in a way,
in some regards, yeah, but he's got like lifetimes and lifetimes of bad karma, so he's going to need to have a lot of bad luck before it even starts making a dent. Or that's my impression, at least.
Maybe I'm underestimating just how colossal his current debt is.
Yeah, yeah. And so in some regards, I guess having bad luck is good, but also it causes things like a sliding door to not open when you need it to.
Yeah, it's a long term kind of a good thing, but you got to be able to survive the bad luck long enough.
Yeah. So Blake has come here to try and win over the knights, and he starts trying to offer things to them in exchange for allegiance. He offers access to the books, but the knights kind of think, actually, no, we don't want too much knowledge, so maybe just like a book every once in a while is all we really need. It's interesting. It's something that's very different to a lot of other practitioners we've seen.
Yeah, well, it's particularly noteworthy because like they're essentially treating practicing like a bit of a hobby is sort of the vibe I'm getting. It's maybe a bit more than like a casual hobby, but it's not something they're devoting their lives to. And like if you have a hobby, like if you get into woodworking, and somebody says, hey, like, help me out, and I'll give you, like, access to all these, like, tools, machines, and, like, resources on woodworking. That is, like, a good incentive. Like, that is better than someone saying, oh, I'll give you access to some of my tools. Whereas, like, so it really shows, like, their sort of respect for the danger of practicing, which I guess, given what happened to them, is very reasonable. But
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. But like, I think that's sort of an important point, is that they do have a respect or a fear of practicing, and so less is more when it comes to offering them stuff, which is kind of counterintuitive in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I get that. I also think it could be interesting to imagine, like, maybe they were just... The situation they're in with the weird abstract demon stuff gives rise to so many interesting thought experiments, because, like, they could have been just the less engaged members of their group, right? Like, their group could have been, like, fervently active about bettering themselves as practitioners, but those are just the members that got eaten off, and now it's just the people who are like, yeah, take it or leave it.
Yeah, well, they're the people who hung back, totally. Presumably. So it's like, you have all the serious people who went in and now they didn't come out, or maybe they did. I don't even know.
Who knows?
But these are the people who just were, maybe they weren't that committed, and now they've sort of had to double down on that without these other people pushing things along.
Yeah, and the end result is they're happy being small potatoes, right? Which is, it's so interesting. The only real comparison we have, the only other practitioners who are in that same camp, really, is the Briar girl, who kind of just doesn't care about power and she just wants to live in nature, right? I love that Blake.
Or the so what was the couple's name from Famulus? The
Lacey and
Famulus
Vic.
example. Yeah, they were another one. Like, she was just a bit of a dabbler. At first.
It's so interesting. I mean, Blake obviously doesn't know about Lacey and Vic. I think it was Rose who was reading that textbook originally. And it's like, this is kind of, while he's in Toronto, Blake is getting exposed to the fact that there's so many different reasons to want to be a practitioner.
Yeah, totally. There's even this bit where the shotgun knight is sort of been like, kind of calling Blake out on how much he's sort of being picky about the distinctions in words, and Blake's like, well, you have to be when you're dealing with all these others, right? The shotgun knight is like, man, I don't handle that shit. Like, I just avoid them.
Yeah, just don't deal with them, Blake.
Yeah, and Blake's just like, that's an option?
Well, not for him, I guess. So the Knights also take an opportunity to kind of give Blake some information about the other Toronto practitioners, right? A bit of an expo dump on just some of the random practitioners around, some that we've met and some that we haven't met.
Yeah, a good mix of other casual groups and then also like the top players.
Yeah. We find out more about the Sphinx, that she takes on mentees and kind of, if they pass her tests, she beefs up their karma, does something to kind of give them a spring in their step. The Astrologer is a title that's passed between people, and the lady that we've met is the most recent. We also learn about something called the Eye of the Storm, which sounds horrifying.
Yeah, it's some sort of disaster, like, spirit. Like, they talk about how it came from fire, and, lots of cities around the world have had great fires, and apparently fire is, like, even more of a thing than, say, like a hurricane or something, because of, like, how important fire has been to the development of humans. The eye... I googled it, and Toronto had a big fire in 1849, so presumably that's where this eye came from.
That's where the eye came from, yeah.
And you gotta worry for London, because I think London's had like quite a few big fires, over the last 1,500 years.
Yeah.
Hate to think what their eye's like, but there's also this thing, it changes a bit, like as everything's moved towards electricity, the eye has like adapted a little bit, which is neat. And I like all these all these little tidbits about the other casuals. Like there's this secret society that's used to be a sorority, and they just do like real estate deals, and it's very like
it's the Witches of Toronto.
Yeah, it's just exactly what you think of when you think a movie made in the 1970s about like, a witch cult in a small town. Like they all get around and and they make deals with demons to impact like real estate prices. It's hilarious.
I feel like there was an episode of Supernatural that was like that, where there were a bunch of like, suburban mums making deals with demons. It's a classic.
Yeah, exactly. There's also this mention of one, I assume a guy called the Queen's Man, who goes between Toronto and England and is serving a spirit of crown and kingdom.
Yeah.
Which I hope that person comes back. I want to see. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably a spirit of crown and kingdom has sort of been diminished over the last 100 years because, empiring was a much bigger thing in sort of the early 20th century and before that, whereas now, most of the British Empire has sort of become independent throughout the 20th century.
Yeah, but then, I would have said similar things about conquest, but,
absolutely.
I reckon there's some abstract interpretations of how the crown and kingdom can get power.
I mean, I guess, and also diminished doesn't mean not powerful, I should say. Like,
well, yeah.
It could have gone from 100 to 95, but it's still a 95.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're talking about the most successful colonizers here, so
yeah, exactly.
A diminishment in power, doesn't mean that much. Anyway, so they eventually kind of get around to talking about what happened with the abstract demon, the real meat of what we wanted to hear about from the Knights of the Basement, or at least what I wanted to hear about.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't really have much to offer aside from, well, we don't even know what worked or what didn't because we don't remember anything.
Yeah.
They can remember a few things that sort of were so ineffectual that the abstract demon didn't even bother to like destroy them, so they can remember it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty tragic. I mean, like, just thinking about this, the more you find out about it, the more it kind of hits you what it actually means. Their lives are just irrevocably altered by something they can't even remember. And, just like Lacey and Vic, who we mentioned before, they're just kind of doomed to live out the rest of their days as mediocre. I don't know. It's rough.
Yeah, like back when we first found out about this demon, we sort of talked about how terrifying the concept of having yourself completely obliterated from existence is.
Mm.
And this section of the chapter really made me possibly even more horrified about the concept of having to people who are close to you. I think the bit that really got to me was that girlfriend of Shotgun's son, Marcy, and they don't remember her last name, presumably because her parents were killed. So like the concept of her last name was also obliterated, and now she's just sort of gone because everyone around her was presumably killed. Like I think if she's lucky, she's maybe in a mental institution in some sort of catatonic state. But yeah, like there's just knowing that there's this hole in your life and like the wondering you do about that. It's sort of like when people who are like relatives of someone who was missing, and if someone's missing for a long time and they turn up dead, some families talk about how there's like relief in the closure, and that's sort of similar here. There's no closure available. There's just some gap in your life, and you're never going to find out what happened there.
Yeah, I think so. There are 4 people that we see here, right? There's Shotgun's son, the woman, and the man, the other man.
Yeah.
And that's all we really see. And we kind of get the picture that that's basically all of them. Shotgun mentions a wife, presumably his son's mother. So she's probably still around. She's probably not eaten.
Well, if he remembered her, then yeah. I wonder if she had been eaten, like, would he not remember that that's his son? Like, it's crazy.
So there's 5 of them, right, roughly. Then counting Marcy's family and Marcy, that's probably 4 people, 5 people.
Yeah.
Then it's probably a safe bet that the large guy and the woman also had connections. So kind of conservatively, you can imagine their group was at least 12, 13. And they mentioned that they kind of investigated some bigger things like a factory and an abandoned farm. And so it basically means they've lost, 2/3 of their group, at least?
See, a factory to me implies that, like, that is a conservative estimate. Like, we could be talking 40 or 50 even. It's crazy to think.
That's it. That's just their lives now.
Yeah. Terrifying.
So eventually they also discuss the hyena, which is Blake's more immediate problem, but they basically don't have any helpful info for him on this. It's kind of unhelpful.
Yeah, well, because they've just avoided that problem. Like that's a whole bunch of fuck that for a normal person. I totally get why they have just been like, sense. Yep, yeah, I'm like, no, thank you. I like this bit where they're talking about how noise will attract more of the spirits, and Blake goes, it'll be stealth then. That's more my style, maybe.
Is that your style, Blake?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to say he can't do stealth, because he did infiltrate Laird's like house, and that was cool, and he did some good sneaking and lying, or not lying. But stealth doesn't seem to be his first pick, or at least maybe there haven't been many opportunities for him to. I'd probably have to go back and think about it. He probably hasn't been presented with any opportunities to be stealthy, but he does tend to very quickly go for the like, hey, I'm over here, fuck you, fuck everything.
Fuck over here kind of vibe.
Which is the opposite of stealth. I don't know. I this statement just jumped out to me because I was sort of like, is that really your style, Blake? That doesn't. Not saying you can't do it, but I'm saying, do you?
Yeah, you're right. I don't think it is his style. I don't know. Maybe a bit of self-delusion there. Although he does love using glamour, so maybe that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's true. And so then there's another bit. They start talking about why doesn't he just like run away? The Knights are just like, just leave Toronto. Like,
Yeah, just
he's not
leave.
going to send. He's not going to send anything worse than the hyena after you. And he sort of mentions that he has someone that Conquest has sort of captured, and he needs to save them. And they're like, "Oh, do you love her?" And Blake thinks that's a good question. Do I love Rose? Is it narcissism if I do, or is it familial love?
Mm.
And this really jumped out to me because I'd been assuming there was a familial connection there. Like, I sort of view them as sort of twins. Like, I feel like if this was happening to me, I would be viewing Rose as a sort of pseudo twin. And so familial feelings seem like the obvious thing to have. Yeah. But Blake doesn't open with thinking about that, or even thinking about the narcissism of kind of loving a vestige of yourself. His first question is, do I love Rose? Which is, a bit telling.
Yeah. He doesn't have an answer though. And it's interesting because they're asking him. I'm going to pull out another quote from basically the same part where Shotgun asks, "You swore an oath?" It hadn't even crossed my mind, but it was an easy answer to give. Yeah, well, I made promises to her that I can't fulfill unless she's free. And so it's pretty apparent that this is not the reason why Blake isn't leaving. He's just kind of giving it as an answer to get them off his back. But he can't really justify why he can't leave her, right?
Yeah, well, so to me, this kind of answered the question for us, because Blake is not trying to save her for, like, out of a sense of obligation. Like, or it's not like, oh, well, I made that deal with her, and the Shotgun Knight calls it a stupid mistake, I think, straight after. And that, but that's the thing, like, Blake, he's not doing it for this promise he made, even though that sort of serves as this good excuse. He just wanted to do it anyway, which I think kind of answers the question, even if Blake hasn't really put that together. I wonder what Rose's answer would be. If Rose was asked the same question, like, do you love Blake? I imagine she would have particularly strong mixed feelings at this point.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's hard to give an answer to that when you are what she has compared to being a slave.
Yeah, exactly.
So through this kind of conversation, Blake has won over the Knights enough that they want to help him. The Shotgun Knight provides him with some chain and kind of shows him a rune that will keep it quiet. And they also give him a shotgun that's marked with like a wind rune that gives it a little power boost.
Yeah, some classic loot. You get some loot from the Knights of the Basement. It all adds up.
Yeah. I really love... It's so fun as Blake learns more runes or binds more, spirits to objects. It's like he adds a Chekhov's gun to his collection that I can't wait to see how it pays off.
Yeah, true. Although it's interesting, I wonder if this story's ever going to get to the point. Like, I feel like usually when you have, like, to compare it to something like Harry Potter, you start off and it's like every spell matters. But then by the time you sort of get to the end of the series, people just popping off all sorts of spells because they've been at school for 7 years. And I mean, at the rate this story's moving, like the 4-month gap in 1.1 excluded, the whole story is going to take place in about a month. But I wonder if there will be that sort of turning point where Blake gets to learn a bunch of stuff off screen, and then we're not sort of clinging onto every little trinket he's managed to acquire from some dudes on a roadside convenience store.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. No comment. So they also talk about, or Blake brings up some of the ideas that are in a book he's read, and he's presumably referring to Black Lamb's Blood here.
Yeah, I'd assume so.
Talking about whether Diabolists can kind of bear the brunt of bad karma for dealing with the bad things, because somebody has to, right? And so why not just let Diabolists have bad karma and they'll kind of go on their way?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Elliot?
Actually, I mean, our notes are a bit janky here because I had written a bunch about this already earlier, and then saw this note from you and just sort of copy-pasted all my stuff down here. So first of all, I hope the next interlude is this Black Lamb book, or part of it, not the whole book. Because now I'm really curious what's in it. But the gist of this propaganda seems to basically be implying that, like, Diabolists are the people who work in the shadows to serve the light,
Yeah.
type deal, which seems like bullshit to me. I'm not buying it. Especially like because this came from the lawyers. Just the fact that the lawyers would give him a book that opens with that is shifty as hell. And then everyone hates them so much. Like the majority of the Diabolists we've even sort of heard about from the lawyers seem like absolute monsters.
Yeah.
So, and they're getting all this bad karma. Like I think if you were actually sort of a soldier in this war fighting for order and karma, we sort of talked about how demons and sort of devils disrupt order. It seems like it would be good karma to stop them from doing that. So I'm not really buying it.
Sure. All right. Well, we'll see. I want to pull out a quote that's just a great line, great few lines. Where Blake says, "You gave me your gun." I said, "Yeah. Don't suppose you give me your name?" "Nick," he told me. Not an important quote. It's just a great example of how good of an everyman Blake is in this chapter. He's just so likable. I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, like because he makes a point. There are multiple times in the first like third of the chapter where he specifically asks for their names. He's like, at first they sort of say, "We're not going to give you our names," and then later Blake's like, "Actually, I should really get your names," and they're like, "Nah." And so this really caps off that feeling that he's won them over because Nick tells him his name. He's not the shotgun knight anymore. He's Nick.
Third time lucky has more power in it.
I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, good point.
So now he's going to use their names to fuck them over.
I hope not. I like these Knights of the Basement.
Yeah, they're cool, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're allies, I guess. Yeah. So one of the knights, Teddy, drops off Blake right at the edge of the forest and doesn't want to take him in any further, which is fair enough. It's spooky.
Yeah.
And Blake kind of gets out of the car and straight away is being pursued by ghosts.
I mean, I do get the impression they're kind of everywhere, so this seems like it was maybe inevitable, but bad luck for Blake, I guess.
Yeah. So he's being followed by a ghost that is screaming about a car crash, trying to call out to somebody called Day, and his legs have been, fucked up by this car crash, and he just kind of sends out waves of phantom pains into Blake's legs as he screams.
Yeah, and like a sense of incapacitation is how Blake describes it. But like, man, fuck ghosts! Like they're just walking around spreading their trauma like it's confetti.
They are just trauma, localized trauma. This is just a great threat, right? Like it's straightforward, it's simple, it's easy to understand. It's a guy. He was killed in a car crash. His legs were fucked up, so he just kind of radiates leg fucking up energy.
Yeah, I really like the moment where Blake is sort of like, it's just like from the ghost. It's not a real thing. But it doesn't actually really help him get up. Like, he's sort of crawling and he wants to walk, but, just telling himself, oh, it's fake, doesn't work, which I think is something a lot of stories tend to, be like, oh, and then I realized the pain was fake and I could work through it. Is something you see. And that always bothers me. So it was good to see Pact not do that.
Something along that vein, I don't think it was a negative, but something kind of along that vein happened in the chapter with Poos, right? Where Blake kind of realized, oh, this is June affecting my mind. Okay, now I can kind of handle it, right? And he kind of tries the same thing here, and it's just doesn't work at all.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know, there's like a bit of a difference between a mental block that you can use your mind to work around versus just like feeling like your legs are falling off. Doesn't seem like something you could just be like, oh no, that's not really happening. I'll just like go for a jog now.
Yeah, but no jog. Blake kind of scrambles up a tree to get away and hides and is startled by another ghost, a little boy with a hood, who kind of whispers creepily at Blake and then jumps off the tree and runs off, and Blake just is stuck in the tree by himself.
Well, and the little boy implies that there's a wolf thing coming, which I'm going to assume is the hyena because the Knights of the Basement said it was a quadruped. And I guess like an evil goblin quadruped might look a bit like a wolf.
Sure,
I don't know. But I'm pretty sure Blake saw this little boy last time when Fell drove him past. Like I think he specifically described a little boy running through the trees. So
I went back and I looked after you wrote that, and there's a quote here that says, again, my eye caught a glimpse of another spirit in the hyenas woods. A ghost, I was pretty sure. A child in a long hooded jacket running between the trees. I wasn't sure, but I hadn't seen any wounds.
yeah,
So,
and again, he does kind of highlight in the tree that this boy has no wounds. So this is almost certainly a thing. What kind of thing? I'm completely unsure of, but
You want to make a guess? Who do you think this boy is?
yeah,
Go
I
wild,
honestly,
Elliot. Go big or go home.
I can't even think of a stupid suggestion to make that adds up
All
at all.
right.
He's going to be a factor. That's about all I can even think of. But I don't even know if it's going to be a good or a bad one.
Okay, and that's the end of the chapter. Blake is just kind of stuck up a tree,
Yeah.
reduced back to man's most basic instinct. Yeah. So that's the end of our chapter. Before we dive into some comments, I thought a reminder about our discussion question. That answers have already started coming in. I'm seeing some really interesting ones in there. We'll be diving into some of our favorite answers at the end of our next episode. So make sure you leave your answers to this discussion question in the thread linked below. That question is: if you became a practitioner, how would you handle your Muggle relationships?
Yeah, so, I guess Chuck answers either in the discussion thread for this chapter or the previous one. We'll be picking out of both, but yeah.
Yep. Anyway, let's dive into some comments, because there are really some fun comments in the comments for this chapter. I pulled out a little thread talking about the abstract demon, which, in case you haven't picked up, it's like one of my favorite topics.
It's such a great concept. I'm kind of holding off talking about it too much until we get to see it. But I'm so excited.
Yeah, fair. So I picked out a thread of comments by some users, including Possum559 and Raffinius, talking about like why people haven't dealt with this demon yet. The idea they bring up is, people probably have tried to deal with the demon, but you just don't remember them, right? And it kind of leads to this interesting thought about everyone's kind of treating this demon like, oh yeah, it's a minor demon, right? And the reasoning they give is, sure, it's powerful, but it hasn't really done much, and it doesn't move around much. And it's just, it's like, hasn't it though? I mean...
Yeah, well, you wouldn't know. Like, it's exactly the point, right? Like, for all we know, there's a giant scar going across, like, Canada or just North America of, like, the waste this thing's laying in its path that nobody has noticed. Or remembers.
It could have totally subsumed places, and the Knights of the Basement are the first group of 40 people that have had any survivors, right? Like, for all we know, this demon could have done some crazy shit, which I just love as a concept. Like, yeah, it's just minor, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that, but it's definitely plausible. That's the thing about this demon is you actually can't rule that out.
Yeah, you can't rule out basically anything about it. It's awesome. Anyway, I just love talking about the abstract demon.
Yeah, so along a similar sort of thread, or a similar sort of idea, thread's a poor word choice in this context. I have a comment from a user named Enju. I assume that's how you meant to pronounce that.
I think it's Enjao.
Enjao? It thinks that it was sort of noticed a running theme in Pact, which is that people tend to ignore their problems until they're too big. And Blake is a sort of living example of what happens when you do this.
Yep.
He's just been thrown into the deep end. And so Enjao specifically sort of talks about these demons around Toronto, like the hyena and everything. Like, they've just been around for a while and nobody really proactively seems to fix these problems. Everyone's a bit sort of self-serving. Conquest is probably another good example. We've seen that Blake seems to think he's not that difficult to handle in a one-on-one, so it kind of just seems like while things aren't terrible, people are more than happy to just kind of sit on their asses and try and get a decent status quo from themselves. Yeah,
I mean, I guess so many practitioners are defensive, right? They don't want to rock the boat in a lot of ways. And I get that, because it is a world where perception can be totally fucked with, and your impression of, oh, this person is easy to deal with could be just totally wrong, and then you suffer fates worse than death. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it ties into what we sort of talked about last chapter about ignorance and all that, and I think one of the responses to Enjal's comment brought that up as well. Like, there's this concept that people also don't want to learn more all the time, and we see that with the Knights of the Basement here. Like, people don't want that to be their problem, and it sort of backs this concept of the Diabolists as warriors who are kind of actually stepping up, whereas everyone else is kind of just hoping the problem goes away, which, kind of adds up.
Are you coming around to the book now, Elliot? You're on board. Diabolists are the true heroes.
I still think maybe it's bullshit, but it certainly ties into this theory quite well.
Yeah. Some good comments. I really enjoyed reading through the comments of this chapter.
Yeah, me too.
But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our episode. Hope you've enjoyed our discussion on 4.10. I really love Collateral as an arc. There's so much good shit in here. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a long one, but it hasn't been boring for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So now, if you want to leave us your answers on Collateral 4.10 or leave us your answers to the discussion question, you can do so by leaving us a message in our discussion thread, which will be linked in the show notes for this episode.
That's right. And if you want to help us out and help out the rest of the Doof network, of which we're a proud member, you should head over to patreon.com/doofmedia. There you can donate and you get a bunch of cool perks for doing that. It's
all
worth
kinds
it.
of cool perks. Join the Discord and chat to us and chat to everybody about all the movies that are coming out lately. Or if you're on Patreon and you want to throw some money in a different direction, you can head over to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. He makes all these stories, so we want to help him out, so you should too. Go and give him some money. It'll be good. It'll be worth it.
Yeah, it's a lot of stories and they're really good quality, so he definitely deserves something for his efforts.
The feeling of guilt that you get when you read every new chapter of Ward every 3 days for free, that totally goes away when you back people on Patreon. It's awesome.
Yes, and finally you can find out more information about us and the rest of the shows on that Doof network by heading to doofmedia.com. And in fact, I think on there there's we're heading into some of the final rounds of March's Madness. I believe when this episode comes out, we'll be down to the final 4. So last chances to get your votes in.
Miss Militia's already out, so what does it matter? Why even bother?
By the time this episode comes out, we'll find out if Amy managed to beat Imp.
It doesn't look good.
I'm not optimistic, but you never know.
Yeah.
There might be a mysterious last-minute surge.
Imp who? That's what I say. Literally. So if you want to catch us for our next episode, that will be on Monday, the 1st of April now. Gosh, getting into the year. That'll be Collateral 4.11, and we'll see you then.
See ya.